teachers and those interested in drama teaching, um, one of our chats. And we're going to have a chat with a special guest today. My name is Martin Robinson, and I've got with me, says me looking desperately over here and trying to put him in. There he is, Mark Wheeler. Hello, Mark. How are you?
Hi. Yeah, very good, very good.
You look well.
Well, yes, I've had a good lockdown, so I've got nothing to complain about. So yeah.
Good stuff. Mark, we're going to talk a bit about drama teaching and the way we've done it in the past and perhaps would do it now, and also about the whole field of drama teaching beyond what we do, perhaps giving some opinions about ways forward for it in the future. But also, people are dying to know you're a playwright. Your books are many and varied, but there's quite a few of them on the exam syllabi. I say syllabi rather than syllabuses, you'll note. Exam syllabi for various of the English exam boards. Could you tell us which plays feature at the moment?
At the moment, Hard to Swallow is on EduQuest, but that's going to change to I Love You Mum, I Promise I Won't Die next year or the year after. And Missing Dan Nolan is a set text on the OCR exam, GCSE. And I knew nothing about the fact they were going to be included. It was nothing to do with me, and it's a great honour to be up there with all these kind of proper writers, whereas, we were just a group from a comprehensive school in Southampton or Epping doing our thing.
Now, hang on, you've just said Southampton or Epping. I'll come to the plays in a bit, but Southampton or Epping,
Yeah,
as in Epping Forest.
as in Epping, St John's School, Epping, yeah.
So you taught first in London and then I call it London, Essex, and then in Southampton.
I think it goes back further than that. I think it goes back to school days. So that goes back to Bristol. Actually, it goes back even further than that. It goes back to junior school days in near Manchester, in Bollington. So I was at a junior school, as everybody else was, and my mum and dad moved around a lot. I was doing really, really well as a kid in junior school, loved school. And then I was suddenly taken over to a private school, taken for voice trials. Went to Lincoln Cathedral School, and suddenly at that point, life became very difficult because I was placed into a very difficult sort of educational system, and also what ended up being an abusive one. And I was dreadfully homesick. It put me off school completely, and I ended up not doing well. I failed the 11 plus. I became the class clown. That was my way of dealing with things. I wasn't top of the class, which I was used to being. I ended up being bottom of the class, but a year ahead of myself. They kept me back for a year. And at the end of prep school, you're meant to do a thing called the common entrance to get into a public school. And I wasn't allowed to do that. So I just had to go to the local school. And by that point, my mum and dad had moved from Lincolnshire to Bristol, and I ended up in a secondary school, which was a grammar school. And I was put in. Even though I'd failed the 11 plus, somehow my dad, I think, managed to pull some strings, and I managed to get into the third year of a grammar school, which in the fourth year turned into, mysteriously and magically, a comprehensive school. And we moved up the road to a brand new building. And from being in the bottom set, I was suddenly put in a mixed ability group. And I think that's where all my kind of educational thing began. And I was able to be much more fluid and move between being a bottom set kid, not feeling able to mix with the upper set kids. Suddenly I was in the same class as these upper set kids, and I was working with them. That really made the biggest difference. That'll take me through to, and I was in mainly CSE groups, so I didn't do O level. And I got, in the end, 6 equivalent O levels. Three of them were CSE grade ones. And I'll leave sixth one for a minute later because maybe it would be interesting to hear what your junior school and secondary school education was,
Oh
and I'll
my,
come back
oh
to
my,
this.
oh my goodness! I don't know how to. It sounds very similar sort of
Ah,
experience,
interesting.
which is interesting indeed. I went to a comprehensive as well. That used to be a grammar school, but I started there after it was a comprehensive, and they left the people in charge from the girls' grammar school in charge of the entire thing, and it collapsed. The school was
Ah,
absolutely shocking. There was the discipline structures who were set up for grammar school girls now had to deal with secondary modern boys, and chaos ensued, and it was complete anarchy. I mean, motorbikes on the corridors. I remember one of the teachers' cars being turned upside down in the school car park. Bullying rife,
where was
gangs,
it?
all this
London?
sort of stuff. No, 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 no. I'll it's it's rural Oxfordshire. It's the
Oh my
same
word.
same school that Theresa May went to. And she was at that time, though it was a girls' grammar school when she was there. By the time I got there, it wasn't. And into about the equivalent now of year 10, I think it was, a new headmaster arrived who was a disciplinarian and was there to clear out all the chaotic boys who were leading the whole place astray. And I say boys because most of the chaos was boys, but not by any means entirely. But I ended up being one of those who didn't last that long after his
Wow.
reign began. So,
God.
I was setting up a national union of school students, one of the sort of sub-socialist worker organizations, and a school magazine that was pretending to be subversive, though I've seen copies now. Looking back, I found it in my parents' attic when I went through their stuff there, and
God.
it wasn't subversive at all. But at the time, we felt it was.
Yeah.
But but what I'm interested in here is because one of my motivations as a drama teacher, if you like, was because I had a bad school experience. Never got taught drama. I was in a couple of school
So,
plays and things like that. Um, but was how to look after, the naughty ones, those who were perhaps on the edge of schooling, and was a motivation to become a drama teacher in the end. By the time I got round to it, which was in my late 20s, early 30s. So tell me, why did you become a drama teacher?
right. Well, if I just track back to the first year at the grammar school, and we had also had a head teacher who was appointed. Um, I think the year before I arrived there, he was appointed to transform the school into a comprehensive school, and like your school, we had mostly grammar school staff, and uh, a number of them, I guess, had arrived when he arrived to do the comprehensive transfer, and I guess also a number of them left when the news was that they weren't going to continue to be a grammar school. So there was a dissatisfaction about the comprehensive, but I was in the grammar school, one of the last grammar school years. Um, so at the end of that year, in year what's now called year 9, so the third year, all the naughty kids had to go and see their new head of house in the new comprehensive school, which was all a new post. And the guy who was head of house was a guy called Mr. Cook. And I can remember him going in and just thinking I was going to be told off, which is what had always happened before. And I can remember going in and him saying to me, Mark, from the little I know of you, the Mark that I see other people talking about is not the Mark that is reflected in these school reports. And that really resonated with me. The fact that this was a teacher who wasn't telling me off because I had been naughty, but he was showing trust in me. And I kind of vowed to myself that I would never let him hear about me getting into trouble. So anything that he might hear about or anything that happened directly in front of him would I'd just be nice and be good. And it was that simple. It was like a switch. And I was never, ever bad in front of him. Then tracked forward into the sixth form, and he was still my head of house then in the lower sixth. And it was announced that he was going to leave. And this was my introduction to drama because, like you, there was no drama in the school. And his, I wanted to mark his leaving with something. And so what I did was to arrange a This Is Your Life for him, which was a TV program. We did it as an assembly. And I arranged meetings somehow with his wife and family, and we got brothers and whatever to come to the school, and just arrange this kind of, I guess it was a production, about his life. And that's what I did. But also, I had another thing that I wanted to do, which was to get some of my songs performed because I was a songwriter. I really wanted to be Ziggy Stardust, not a playwright. So I was busy writing, I'll call them rock songs, but they definitely weren't. They were songs, and none of the rock bands in my area wanted to perform them at all. So an ex-girlfriend, she was my current girlfriend at that point, wrote a little play around my songs, and we put on a musical at lunchtime by way of a farewell to him. It was called Hardened Criminals. And that taught me that suddenly there was something I could do. I could gather groups of kids together, get them to enjoy themselves, and in enjoying themselves, work towards something which was a production, which I couldn't write the words to, but I could do the music to. And the success of that led me in the following year, in my final year of sixth form, to do 2 productions. That the Hardened Criminals had about 6 kids in it. The next one had about 20, and the last one had about 80. And in that year as well, a drama teacher arrived. So I kind of hooked up a bit with her and went into her drama lessons and just thought, this is good fun. I could do this. So with literally no drama teaching experience, but seeing her work, doing this work myself in extracurricular, I applied to be a drama teacher at college and went to Goldsmiths and trained for 3 years to be a drama teacher. I failed my A-levels, so I did a course called a Cert Ed. But the value that I had from my sixth form was being able to direct these productions, and that was the most valuable thing.
So you did a Cert Ed at Goldsmiths
Yeah.
and a BA, or just
No,
the
no,
whole
no,
thing, the
nothing.
Cert Ed? So you're not BA'd, you're certed.
I'm certed only, and I
You're
had the option of
certified or
staying
something.
on. I had the option of staying on, but I absolutely didn't want to because
Yeah.
I wanted to get out and be a teacher. I wanted to do more of these productions.
Did that open up primary school teaching for you, or could you go straight into secondary school?
Well, the college that I'd actually applied to closed down in a very early round of government cuts, which was in Birmingham. So I went to Goldsmiths as a last resort, really, and ended up on a middle school course. So I trained to be a middle school teacher, but I knew I wanted to teach specifically drama in secondary. So when it came to applying for jobs, I applied for secondary drama jobs, even though I'd trained to be a middle school teacher and done primary training. So how
Okay,
about
now
you?
that's interesting. Now I went to Goldsmiths to do my PGCE in drama.
Oh my word!
So
What year?
that here we go.
Oh, you'd
19.
have been later because you were older when I was 76 to 79.
Yeah, I was. How old are you?
62,
You
3.
are. You're a tad bit older than me. That's it. It makes a difference because I left school at 79, um, with clutching my length and width swimming certificates.
Oh,
Anyway, so so
do you have any
I ended up
CSEs?
going to a polytechnic in Northeast London Poly, doing cultural studies degree, which is something completely different than perhaps. But as part of that, we had a group project, and that's how I got into doing drama, if you like. And we came that, and then I set up a drama kind of, a sort of arts group after leaving it with people from the course and various other places. and we started working in various small venues, sort of fringe venues around East London. We ended up doing a play, funnily enough, at the Theatre Royal Stratford East, though. So all these
Wow.
sorts of things, yeah, which what I wrote, and it was a play with music in a sort of Brechtian sense. But anyway, so we got all that way. I ended up 1989, 1990, something there. I ended up doing a PGC at Goldsmiths. So that was some time after you. Can you tell me
Okay.
what do you sort of remember about the drama parts of the Cert Ed that you did? I mean, what were they teaching you to teach like, if you like?
They weren't. They were teaching. They were teaching me drama, quote, at my own level, and it wasn't my own level. It was way different to whatever my level was, and I wasn't really interested either. And I can remember that the only thing that vaguely interested me was they did we did a study of a Pinter play called The Birthday Party, and I really enjoyed the idea of him trying to get language to be as real as possible. And I enjoyed his use of pause and all of that kind of thing. So that grabbed me. But little else that we did in drama grabbed me. What we had about, I think, an hour a week training us to teach drama in school. And the people who were on the secondary course got a little bit more than that. I got just an hour a week. Um, but what did grab me was, again, an out of college thing that the movement lecturer was doing. An amazing guy called Tony Key, who worked with 100 plus 140, I think, kids at the Lewisham Concert Hall in a group called 4R, and he choreographed them in dance shows. And I'd seen that he was doing these things, and I said to him, I'm a songwriter. Do you fancy someone writing some songs for you? And he said yes, and he was amazing. He bought me a piano in his house, gave me a key to his house, and I used to go around and write songs in his house for his shows. And I watched him for 2.5 years organizing a group without telling them what to do, but getting them to understand what they should be doing. And he also had some choreographers who did tell people what to do. But the mixture of this, them finding it out for themselves, and directing by almost committee, I guess. But the committee were the young people and old people involved.
Now,
Um,
I'm going to, because I'm really interested in that. Um, I'm first of all, so I'd like to explore that a bit, if that's all right, because I've got, I don't know. We can talk about that. I'm interested that he's getting them to do things, but perhaps he's getting them to do things perhaps in a rather underhand way. But we can. But you saw him do it. No, no, no. I know, but let's see that, because I also, in other words, we're talking about drawing things out from the
yeah,
child, from the pupil, rather than telling them you must do this, and you're making the contrast with the choreographer's job
yeah, yeah.
and perhaps the director's job, and
No,
something
no, no,
there,
no.
well,
They
something
were.
there about acting, which is very important, and teaching there, and what are we expressing, and what are we trying to get out of kids, and things like that. So I think that's interesting. What one thing I will go just rein back on a bit here, to go back to my Goldsmiths days,
Yeah,
and just saying, for me on the PGCE course, about, what's it, 10, 20 years later than you, it's pretty similar. That
wow.
I was amazed that I wasn't being taught drama to teach. But I was being taught thematic stuff to teach, and I remember, and it's hazy now, these memories, of course. But I remember went to a school in Lewisham, and that all of us PGCE students sat around the outside of this classroom, on where the desks had been moved to, and we sat on the desks, and I remember this, and the three teachers of our course, so the three leaders of the PGCE course, did a demonstration lesson. 5 minutes in, they had lost complete control of the class, and it was mayhem, and it was hugely embarrassingly difficult, uh, and 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 the tension was quite extraordinary. But all of us were were finding, of course, because we were all teaching in quite tough East and Southeast London schools, were quite pleased to see that they were having as much trouble as we were, you know.
Yeah.
So there was that to it, but it, it was again, and I think it was something about the match girls or something like that. I can't remember, but there was some stock drama schemes of work that they would do with us, and the match girls strike was one of the classics, and things like that. So it was thematic stuff. It was not theatre based, but it was using drama to explore issues or themes, um, which I started to bulk against this approach to drama at that sort of time, and try to find my way through. And one of the things I remember one of the tutors saying is we must always say where, for teacher in role, I think she was specifically talking about, but we should always say when we're not real and when it's real life, right? Back to real life, now to imaginary life. And I thought, no, why not confuse the two? And this became interesting to me, and that's something I wanted to explore when I became a teacher, was where's the line drawn between real and imaginary?
Mhm.
And let's play that up a bit. And you were there with your David Bowie-esque, not rock songs, making musicals and doing all those things as well. But how did you then move from the exploration of something? You're talking about the teacher there who's drawing stuff out rather than putting stuff in. How does that affect how you sort of went into teaching, do you think?
Oh, totally. But he was an inspirational, absolutely inspirational teacher, and I always credit him along with David Cook, who was the guy who said to me that you're not the Mark Wheeler who I see. I I can, if people describe my teaching, and I've been lucky enough because I've written books. I've just recently finished a book about my teaching, a kind of career retrospective, and a number of students have contributed to it. And I've made the comment in the book that they could be talking about Tony, which is lovely. Um, I've forgotten what the question was. Sorry, Martin.
No,
But I really, really thought he was incredible, and he was a huge, huge
I
influence
was
on me.
going just jumped over the screen there. What I was asking was how, and you brought in a book advert, which I didn't know you brought in, bringing out another book. So that's well done for that one. We'll talk about that as well. The name of, no, tell us now. What's the name of this book? The retrospective book.
Verbatim, the fun of making theatre seriously.
There you go. And who's publishing it?
Salamander Street,
And when's it coming out?
September the something
This year.
this year. Yeah, it
Right.
was one of my lockdown projects.
There you go. So look on Amazon, or there are other booksellers,
Salamanderstreet.com. You'll get it cheap.
including them. Good stuff. Right.
Thank you.
And I didn't know anything about that. So this is good. Now, you were talking about the retrospective. So obviously they were talking about you as a teacher, the
Yeah,
pupils talking about you as a teacher, and some of those we reflected in the I've forgotten his name. The
Tony Key.
right.
Tony Key.
And Tony's work and how that influenced you. Now, this drawing out stuff, and I think we might have a complete agreement and disagreement at the same time with this, because there's something I bulk at and yet something I do, which is specifically about that. So I would like to talk a bit about that when I've heard you talk a bit about what you mean by that.
Well, I can give you an example. Would that help
Yeah.
or not? Okay, so in the first show that I did with him, which is the one I've got the clearest memory of this of, it was called Blackout, and I wrote a song called Blackout, which was a song that supposedly people would have sung in the air raid shelters in the by way of passing the time.
And didn't
And
David Bowie write a song called Blackout as well?
he did, but that was very different and not nearly as good. This was an old wartime pastiche. This was in my Lionel Bart era. Um, so Blackout obviously had some words which I didn't write. And what Tony did was got me to sing the kids the song, and they were looking at the word sheet. And then he said what he wanted them to do was to there's a song called "Under the Spreading Chestnut Tree" where they basically act out the words of that, and that I think was a wartime song. And he said what he wanted to do was create a version of "Black Out Your Windows," which would be similar in style to that "Under the Spreading Chestnut Tree." And he got everybody working. So we had 140 kids in a massive leisure centre gymnasium, I guess it was, working in small groups. And what they did was to come up with their versions of the Under the Spreading Chestnut Tree version of Blackout. We watched them all, and then we'd all select from what different people had done and create a final version of the refrain. And then for the verses, he got I don't know how many groups there were, let's say 10, and let's say 9 because I can do the division more easily. He got 3 of them to do verse 1, 3 of them to do verse 2, and 3 of them to do verse 3, and they did a little acting thing based around this song. And then did exactly the same with that, and then we do the whole thing, and it was just magical how it all came together. And that basically is how I've always worked, without having any plan, just knowing that young people that I work with will come up with something. And I added an extra ingredient, which was doing the real life things, because that gave a reason for doing it that took us out of ourselves. But basically, it's what Tony did, and he did it so well. And not just for songs, he'd do it for music without lyrics, so he'd work abstractly as well. And separately to that, there would also be choreographers who would work on other bits of the show, which would be very much more directly choreographed. So it was a wonderful fusion of all sorts of different inputs, without any value being that one was better than the other. But I couldn't have done the choreography thing. I
Yeah.
could see I could, without any expertise, do the Tony Key thing. And
So
I was able to emulate him.
you're talking about working through improvisation.
If, effectively, yeah.
Yeah. Which of course,
Fairly structured.
yeah, and I think you have to be, don't you, for
Yeah,
to
yeah.
make to make
You're in a box, but you have
make
to
it
find
work.
a way out
Yeah.
of that box. Yeah.
Okay, because what I'm interested in there is the drawing out of stuff. Now, because I was brought up, like I say, Goldsmith, same as you, very much on this thematic. We're going to do 6 weeks on.
I didn't have any of that.
Right. Well, this is how so we have a
Right.
6 week stuff on homelessness and all this,
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be. Now, I think it was Eugenio Barber or somebody I read about saying if you ask people to do a play, they will inevitably do the same play or something like that. They will inevitably ask them to improvise without any constraints, without any rules.
Yeah, yeah.
They will inevitably have someone, you might give them a theme, homelessness or something like that. But if you do that, what will happen is there will be inevitably um, the way that the group said, there'll be the homeless person and then the people around them or whatever. And at some point, the homeless person will die and then be lifted by the others onto their shoulders, and the lights will turn red and you'll get some sort of music, mournful ballad, which I think nowadays would probably be a power ballad or something like that. But it's that sort of thing, that there's cliche, that
Hmm.
you get cliche, and kids of course get cliche because it's all they know. They're trying to draw on very few strands. And so what I did was get rid of themes altogether, and totally stop that and just start from movement, and work on movement, and then repeat it and play with it and follow it, and then move it from solo work to pair work to small group work, and move from there. And we'd use these moves, and then from those movements we and scenarios that we put together, which I call
Hmm.
framed moments, after the Walter Benjamin talking about Brecht idea. So the framed moments say, oh, that works visually. And what's our play trying to say would be the next question. So it's like a sculptor chipping away at, the idea that in this bit of marble there's something waiting to come out, but we don't know
Right.
what it is when we start. And that's kind of the way that I worked. And then I bring in fragments of text from and just books, which was using cutouts, which is how Bowie was writing his songs, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
also William Burroughs, and of course Dadaist approaches, and all this sort of stuff. So we'd start putting together chaotic ideas and then say, what's our play trying to say? And it would look interesting, it would
Yeah.
sound interesting, but we wouldn't know what the hell was going on until quite late. And people who inspired me towards this would be people like Complicite, Simon McBurney's work, and various others, including Eugenia Bardberg, including Jacques Lecoq, via Berkoff, and all these other people, and finding particular interest in I suppose a dance troupe, the Trans Theatre Wuppertal, or Pina Bausch's. Um,
How did you come across all the? Because at
yeah.
college level, I would never have come across. I was forced to come across Brecht and just wasn't interested. I was forced to come across these other people. You mentioned Dada. I'd never heard of that and don't know anything about him now. Where did all of that come from for you?
Yeah, it's interesting, but seriously, two people I would say started this. One of which, I think, doing my course of cultural studies, which
Ah,
which
right.
I saw advertised in The Face magazine, if you remember that, which was a sort of glossier version of the NME in the 80s, and they were advertising for people who had no A levels. I hadn't got A levels, and real people had been out in the world. So I was 23, 24 when I went to uni, or poly, as it
Right.
then was, became a uni after I'd left. But the other one was David Bowie, definitely, and his
Yeah.
his sort of interest and follow, because he was quite, the good thing about him, he wrote about, and you could find out about his influences.
Yeah.
So you'd find out, and obviously Lindsay Kemp, actually, is another name I should have mentioned there, was a great influence. So his Midsummer Night's Dream I went to see, and
Right.
and and various things like that, and got me into mime, which opens up the world of people like, well, in the end, Artaud, and gives me some sort of connection there. But also, I'd studied Brecht as part of the cultural studies course, and that, and because I was living in London, I think it helps as well with Sadler's Wells, and Pina Bausch came to Sadler's Wells. But actually, I know what it was. There was a book by Elizabeth Wright called Postmodern Brecht, and in there, so Brecht, my interest. So I so I look at that book, and I was writing my dissertation at the time. That's it, on postmodern political theatre. Okay,
Right.
that's my dissertation. And in there, she talked about Pina Bausch, and about that time, Pina Bausch came to Sadler's Wells. So and a lifelong love of her work from then on, and the beauty of the visual side to it. And interestingly, one of my pupils I was teaching at that time was Gemma McDonnell, who came to form Paper Birds, and there's a
Ah,
sort of connection to
we have
their
another
work.
connection because one
Go
of
on.
my pupils ended up being involved in Paper Birds, whose name is Kirsty Housley,
Yes,
and she is also Simon McBurney's assistant director.
there you go.
There we are.
We're finding all these connections.
Yeah.
Who are we? But yeah, so we'd work on what I call fragment cards, which were cards of dialogue that we'd put into fragments of movement, and also things to do. So we had fragment cards for now do this, now do that, which were drawn from Brian Eno's cards.
Right. This is
Um,
very Dorothy Heathcottian.
well, it's very, you see, now I'm going to bulk at that. Now, tell me why is it Dorothy Heathcottian? Tell
Oh,
me.
she works in fragments a heck of a lot. But I mean, this needs the next part of my story, which is once I left I call it uni. It wasn't. It was college. It was a part of the University of London. Um, I applied for jobs, and the job I got was in Milton Keynes at an amazing school called Stantonbury Campus. Again, so fortunate to get a job there, where there were four other drama teachers, and I was the baby drama teacher. And they didn't just have one head of department and 4 little drama teachers. They had one director of drama, one head of curriculum drama, one deputy head of drama, and then 2 baby drama teachers, of which I was one. And it was only a school of probably nearly 2,000, but 5 drama teachers. So it was a seriously considered subject. And I think about 130 kids in every year opted for it. So I was part of a school that was it was also very different. So all the teachers were called by their first name. The school didn't have any carpets, and that was a very different thing back. Sorry, it did have carpets, and I remember the local paper said carpets and Christian names, and that made all the difference from the kind of schooling that I had, and represented something so different to what I'd experienced back in Lincoln. And there I met the director of drama, did documentary theatre, and he which was kind of verbatim theatre from history, uh, and the head of curriculum drama was Dorothy Heathcote, advocate, and so via both of them, I learnt. I watched Roy do documentary theatre. I was continuing on a completely separate path, trying to get my songs performed within plays. I was getting the youngsters to write the scripts at this point, but I was just aware in the background of what Roy was doing, and thinking one day I'll do my own documentary plays, but I want to do them more up to date. And then Luke was doing this Dorothy Heathcote style work, which I'd never seen before.
That's
And
Luke Abbott, yeah?
yeah, Luke
Yeah.
Abbott.
Yeah.
And again, he would. I had a timetable where, for the whole of my first year, I worked with him with a whole year 10 group. Every lesson, I would go in and just be effectively a pupil. And Roy came in with me for 1 year 9 group of mine, where we teach, and that's how I learnt to teach at Stantonbury. So my background in teaching was very much through Dorothy Heathcote, transmitted by Luke, who gave a wonderful version of it. And then rumbling on in the background was this documentary theatre thing as well. And that was what served me for the rest of my career. So it added to what Tony had done with these massive number of kids, working in a movement sense. And yeah, so that was my first job. And that was, and I ran out at that point. I ran out of people to write plays for me, so I had to start figuring out how I do the word bit myself, and that's where I began to become a playwright. So I turned Blackout, which I'd done with Tony, into an evacuation story based on my mum's experiences in the war, and kind of structured out an improvised thing. And we wrote a big musical, where I tape recorded the young people doing improvised scenes, and then used those words to create a script.
Mark, where did you learn? You're talking about learning to be a teacher there by, I suppose, the apprenticeship
Yeah,
and working with the masters. I'm going to put that in inverted commas, but
well,
Heathcote
I
and
was
Abbott.
really lucky.
Yeah. Now, how did you become a playwright? I mean, who taught you to write plays? Had you read plays? I mean, you
No,
came from a reasonably, it sounds reasonably posh to me, I must say. You went to prep schools and things like that. So there must be an element of poshness going on there.
music poshness, yes, not play poshness. I had possibly seen. Um, I can't even remember the title. I've written this in the book. Um, there's a play about a girl. I can't even remember what the play was. I might have seen a play. Time in the Conways. Is that a play?
I think so, yeah.
Right. Okay. I might have seen
I've
Time in
heard
the
of it.
Conways. Um, I can't remember anything
You must
about
have
it. I can't
seen
remember.
pantos. Pantomime?
If they came to school, yes, but not. No,
No?
really hadn't seen anything. I'd seen. Um, no, I really hadn't seen anything. But when I went to Stantonbury in Milton Keynes, they ran school trips. So I went with the sixth formers to see. I can remember seeing Jonathan Pryce in Hamlet. I really, really enjoyed that. And at college, I'd also seen Midsummer Night's Dream in Regent's the open air theatre, and that was wonderful. So I'd seen some. I began to see some really good things, but my watching of theatre didn't happen until I moved to Epping and took groups to Edinburgh, and then we started to watch stuff there. But literally, no, I didn't know. We were just making it up as we went along.
Right. So you're making it up as you go along.
Hmm.
So, and you and me both on this. So I'm not going to pull any punches here and say clearly we don't know what we're talking about. Both of us, rather
Yeah,
than rather than one of us. Um, there is, of course, in theatre, a whole group of people who have studied it
yeah,
to a very high level, not just professionally in theatre, treading the boards week in, week out, but also going to places like RADA. And if you were going on a medical course, you'd want people who are trained to teach you about medicine. If you were going on a music course, you'd want people who are trained in music to teach you about music. I would venture similar in the world of art. I mean, painting and sculpture and etc.
no.
That well,
For
no, I'm going to
hang
how to
on.
draw
If
properly. How to
you're
draw.
at
Tracy
PE,
Emin will come into this conversation a bit. What I'm
if you
interested in is
PE, our local sixth form employed Jason Dodd as a football teacher. And I think his expertise in having lived that rather than trained to be a PE teacher was really brilliant.
yeah, lived what
Being
being
a
a
footballer,
footballer.
yeah,
Yeah, so professional
yeah,
within the field, literally in his case.
hmm yeah,
um,
yeah,
sorry about that dreadful pun. But semi-trained, just experienced,
yeah,
um, but not in terms of professional theatre. Now I'm thinking about you're talking about Pinter. It came up earlier, and then seeing a couple of plays when you go to Milton Keynes and then Epping. But the whole professional side of theatre, which Heathcote was not part of, and we'll come to Heathcote's involvement in theatre as drama teaching rather than theatre as a professional way of putting on the art is different. Do you think that drama in schools should be about the art form, and taught by people who know their way around a stage, literally in this case?
it depends. I don't think there's a definitive answer to that because I think I would say that my willingness to go on a voyage of discovery and my students' willingness to come on that voyage with me worked equally as well and possibly better um, than some other drama teachers. But equally, some other drama teachers who have had all the training may have done it better than me. So I'm not saying I'm the best, but I certainly wasn't the worst.
Okay, so things like fights. There are ways of doing fights. There are
Yeah.
some ways of making them look good and do it safely, for example, which should be taught to a teacher, for obvious reasons, rather
Mm-hmm.
than just trying to make it up as you go along. You mentioned choreography and also things like set design and lighting and puppetry. And if we go into circus skills, which I know we could do as well, you'd want someone who knows how to operate on a tightrope and a trapeze. You'd want them to be able to do it professionally. People who know about stage left, stage right, downstage, upstage, and about voice projection, movement in space. This is a favorite drama teacher word, proxemics, all these sorts of things. Um, Now, if you're coming into teaching in a secondary school now at the age of, let's say, 21, 22, don't you need to know about all that stuff rather than I've done a bit, and I'm talking about me here, I've done a bit
Yeah,
here and I've watched a bit of Pina Bausch. I think I can now be a drama teacher. Don't you think they have to be more professional than you and me had to be in those days?
yeah, but they're still young, and maybe they do, but I don't know whether that's good or bad.
No, well,
because
that's another thing entirely.
yeah,
But isn't the art of theatre important to pass on, important to learn about? And that's what children should be learning more about in school, the art of theatre, rather than me poncing around with my ideas around Pina Bausch.
for me, I just wanted to be involved in something that young people were engaged in
Yeah,
and that they were enthusiastic about, that I was enthusiastic about. And fortunately, throughout my career, I was allowed to get on and do that.
yeah,
So,
and me too. And I think that when I started teaching, there was only a CSE in drama, that it was non-examined for most places. Then it became examined,
oh, yeah,
and then it became the
other,
GCSE.
yeah,
So 88. So actually, it was already a GCSE by the
yeah,
time I got into teaching. There was the GCSE, and there were things I taught GCSE drama, the EdXL, which
ditto,
was then the London Board, I think it was,
yeah,
and also community theatre, which was a lovely course, GCSE 1 year course,
yeah,
which was fantastic. Um, but they were very much open to people like the Dorothy Heathcotes of this world,
yeah.
yourself, myself, who were um, dabbling with the art form in a creative sense. We were creating things from improvisation. We were grabbing hold of things, and all these ideas which now become, I think, in stone to some extent. Roll on the wall, conscience alleys, or all these other things that freeze frames,
I
still
didn't ever use
images.
any of those things, to be honest.
Right, okay, but they started to be entrenched in the I keep saying EdXL, the London board's
Yeah, they got names,
descriptions.
didn't
Yeah, they
they? Yeah,
got named. They got said this is what this is,
yeah.
and it became more and more part of it. And even to
And what that
today,
was watering Dorothy Heathcote's stuff down to absolutely what it wasn't.
can you examine Dorothy Heathcote? That's I mean I don't mean examine Dorothy Heathcote, but
Yeah, we
can she become
used
part
to
of the
answer
exam?
it.
I don't think so. There was a big
Yeah,
argument at the time. People saying you can't examine drama. The whole point of drama is to be anarchic, to explore things. It's not to be examined. It's for the good of the child. It's nothing to do with whether they pass or fail. Anyone, can be as good as anyone else. And talking about drawing out from them. Wasn't that part of the argument at the time?
yeah, we used to examine it at Stantonbury from a Dorothy Heathcote perspective, and we could have people who were good at it and people who weren't as good. Um,
Do you
yeah,
mean kids?
yeah.
You were happy to tell kids they'd failed at a bit of mantle.
Well, I wasn't Mantle the expert, but we
Yeah, okay.
we did Dorothy Heathcote style things, and we had to mark them within the CSE. We did one of these Mode 3 CSEs,
Yeah.
and yeah, they were marked. And yes, we were happy to tell them
Were,
what.
right. Were you happy though? I mean, I mean, because I
Yeah,
remember that when the CSE came, no, I mean, but seriously, because there's this almost drama as therapy sort of approach, which is we're working in the inner city with these kids who've had difficult lives. We're going in there, we're using drama as a way of freeing them in the Paulo Freire sort of way,
yeah, but what
theatre
we did
for the
was
oppressed,
allow
if you like. So
a,
Boal.
a number of kids to do really well in a subject and get that kind of ratified that they'd done well. So I felt it was really good that we were doing that.
Okay. Now, people would argue that this is where drama becomes more part of the curriculum, part of the pass or fail sort of culture of things, and gets it to a point where it has to be fair because it's such a subjective thing. We've all had examiners who come in who've looked at our kids doing a group piece and then come up with grades that we look at and say, "How the hell have they given that grade to that to
Oh,
that one?" How
would I
can
rather not have exams? Yeah, I can remember at the end of one of the last youth theatre performances I did with my youth theatre was "I Love You, Mum," and my head of faculty was the music teacher who had written the underscore for the whole production. And at the end of the production, when Dan's mum and dad were there watching, uh, he had to come and grade me on lessons. And I leant back to him and said, "What grade does that get then?" And he laughed, and he could see, it was beyond grades. It was just really good. And you didn't need to have a grade to it. So I was lucky. A bulk of my work that I was doing was in extracurricular. And if I look back on my life, and my kids' lives as well, all the most important work for all three of our kids and for me came from what was going on in extracurricular, not in the curriculum. So for me, that's where the big value was, in youth theatre, and in extracurricular, not from exams. My exams don't bear any relevance to my life whatsoever, other than being a little key to a door.
And now I think that key's got bigger for kids these
Absolutely,
days,
yeah,
and the fact that they've just gone through a system of teacher assessed grades, so
yeah,
tags,
yeah.
have become, well, hellishly time consuming, but quite stressful for teachers to get
But that
this
was,
fair. How do we know that the school in, Southeast London is marking the same? Let's say it's the same kid doing the same thing, exactly the same in Southampton, let alone when a travelling examiner does it. It's likely to get grades all over the place to some extent. Now, this is why
the same
drama.
exists with a reviewer. A reviewer comes and slates a play, and we were
Yeah, but it isn't
described
though,
in
because
one play in Edinburgh as being the worst at the festival, and the next day we got 5 stars.
yeah, well, which is a case in point, of course. But these are children, and it's ostensibly their future. It's also the school who needs your grades there to keep their
That's where the
place in the
problem.
league tables. So they're high stakes. And you
Yeah.
could say it's slightly more high stakes than Edinburgh Fringe Show, but not necessarily. And I understand that. But because of the high stakes nature of it, they've had to make exams more accountable.
Hmm.
Now, what this has ended up with in the terms of drama is become more and more a written exam,
Hmm.
evidence, and
Yeah.
complaints can be made by parents, and they can say, well, look, here's the evidence for it. Now, in the days when I was, most of the work was, well, it was group work, um,
100% practical.
100% practical, and then it came to 60% practical, 40% coursework, written coursework, and it's got to a point now. I think it's up to 80% written, most of which is in paper exams, and the 20% coursework come practical coursework,
Yeah.
is much less of a thing than it used to be. It used to be the major part to it. So the accountability system, if you like, has made drama less dramery and more history come theory. And
Yeah.
do you think that, can you see why that might be done because of exams, and why that's not necessarily a bad thing either, but it's different than we experienced when
No,
we
I
started
can't
teaching?
see why it's not a bad thing. I think it is a bad thing, and I'm so fortunate. I left teaching by chance the year that all the written exams big time came in, when the syllabus, what are they called, the way in which the exam is structured changed. I happened
Yeah.
to leave that year, so
Did
I
you
left at the right
did you
time.
teach did you teach the A level ever?
Uh, no, and I wouldn't have been able to. Yes, I did for a year. I was thoroughly rubbish at it because I didn't have enough information. I had a lovely A level group, one of whom I've started to work again with last week. This is back in Epping in 1985. We ran it for a year because when I took over at Epping, they had groups of 6 doing drama. The next year, we were having groups of 60 from a year group of about 100. And then they wanted to go on to do A level, so I wanted to offer it. So myself and an English teacher offered it, and I did the fun bit, and she did the Englishy bits.
The
And
Englishy bit.
yeah,
What
and
A level was it? Do you remember?
there was only one, so we didn't have a
AQA.
choice. Yeah,
AQA Theatre Studies. Yeah,
yeah.
I loved it. I
And
loved
we did it.
teaching.
We did it for one double year, and then I left and moved to a school that was 11 to 16. So it wasn't ever an issue. So,
I love
so
that.
I wouldn't have been able, and I came unstuck when BTEC came in, and
Right.
suddenly I had to know about theatre history because I didn't. So I had to go on a summer holiday, and I can remember sitting in Spain and reading really boring books about theatre history. Um, and
All right.
was
You see, the A level made me a better teacher because I had to do what you did, but I
yeah,
had to read on, go back over my Breck stuff from a course, but find out more about the theatricality of it rather than just the theory and the Marxist stuff, which I was well versed in. And then Artaud and Stanislavski, but particularly Artaud was just such a wonder to me. And to be able to teach it, and I went on a course at the Aberystwyth School of Performance Research,
oh wow,
and they did an Arto course there, and it over a weekend. But the talks were high quality stuff, and we kept all the papers, which I've still got from it, and it
mm,
was so enlightening. Did a same one. They did a Brecht one with Brecht and Eisenstein as well, which again. So the academic side of theatre actually really grasped me, and then Chekhov and finding Chekhov and teaching the seagull and the cherry orchard and Shakespeare, blah blah blah, and then the Greeks, and then teaching Oedipus and teaching Antigone, and Antigone particularly, I love it. But those sorts of things, I became educated academically in theatre by teaching it, and that A level really opened up that world to me. But I think it's interesting, of course,
yeah,
that this now is more the world of what we need. And I'm saying we need because, in terms of curriculum and in terms of exams at secondary school, kids need that stuff. The other person who opened my eyes to this was Ken Campbell. I'm working with Ken Campbell. Um, was eye opening in lots of ways. But one of the things he taught me, I mean, apart from improvisation and all those things, which is another thing, but one of the things he taught me was rep. How the rep in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, how rep theatres um, did plays without directors, how people would know where to stand on the stage, how they would do all these things, and he taught me the 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 rep way of doing things. So those two angles, the highly academic, then the highly bung this on a stage stuff. Whether
mm,
it's the Tempest one week, Cherry Orchard the next week. How to bung it on the stage, and he calls it the rules. These are the rules. Don't ask why. This is
yeah,
just the way you do it. And that was a fascinating education as well. So I
mm,
became educated in those things. And to me, looking at theatre when it's improvised by kids who are having it drawn out of them, they need the constraints of the rep. They need the constraints of whether it be Brecht or Pina Bausch or whatever, these various ways of seeing theatre, and the Greeks, um, and commedia, etc., etc. These
mm.
help them
Oh
in,
yeah,
yeah, and that's what I think needs to be taught in schools. Even though
yeah,
I didn't teach in that way until
yeah.
retrospectively looking back on it, and then doing more and more as in my final years of teaching.
I did it differently because I used the real stories
Yeah,
to
go on.
force us to come up with ways of staging. So we invented all those things that ended up being um, techniques because frantic assembly wasn't around. So I can remember with Too Much Punch for Judy in Epping having to figure out we're going to have to stage the car accident, and our motivation to do that play meant we had to figure out how, and it took ages.
Yeah,
We did it, and also through that and through Roy Nevitt at Stantonbury, I learnt bits and pieces about Brecht, and I became interested from him in learning that. Uh, and but I could choose if I was going to be bothered. I wasn't forced to sit down at. And the other
hang on.
thing
What do you mean
you
forced?
said, what made me become a writer? One of the things
Right.
was I couldn't be bothered to read plays, so it was much easier to write something that I knew was going to be good for my kids.
But you liked
Right.
Pinter.
Sorry?
But you liked Pinter.
No, no, no. I was
You did. You
interested by his by what he was trying to do. I went to see Betrayal at the National during the time that we were studying him, and really hated it.
right.
Um,
Wasn't he pretty self-taught in his own way?
Possibly, I don't. I honestly,
Did he
I'm
go to
not a big.
Hackney Downs or something like that? I can't remember now.
Yeah,
But influenced by Beckett.
but a lot of people are. You know, a lot of the computer people who have set up Facebook and so on, they weren't even studying computers, and they went off and did this. And it's what Steve Jobs says. You know, you look back and you can connect the dots in retrospect, but then they're not there ahead of you, and you want to do that, but you can't do that.
Yeah, so self-taught,
Is
um,
me.
and me too in this field, very much so. But like I say, I can see by being self-taught, if you like, how much I've missed out on by not being taught
Right.
in within the art form itself, and then having to find it out, and then then apply things retrospectively. Oh yeah, then I can do this. If you were writing a curriculum today for today's schools, with today's teachers, with today's students, with today's exams in a secondary school, what do you think it would be like?
I wouldn't want to do it, and I couldn't do it because I think the extracurricular is what has been really important for me and my children.
And that's making stuff, though, isn't it?
Yeah, for
It's
Ollie it was
making theatre.
well, in my instance, yeah. In Charlie's it was dance. In Ollie's it was art. In Daisy's it was singing and
Yeah.
music.
Okay.
So they're the things that have lasted with them.
Which
And
is the one who did Circus Skills?
Charlie, he was a
Charlie.
he was a break dancer. So all of that, you know, and he fortunately went to a school where they had a dance department, and he was one of the first boys to do dance, and then he came home one day and said, I'm going to go and do a circus degree. And
Yeah, yeah.
as a drama teacher, I thought it was the stupidest idea ever. And
But
but it's been the best thing he's ever done because it gave him a career and it gave him a
yeah,
unique skill.
and I'm interested in that they don't teach circus skills by drawing it out of it. They tell them how to do it, don't they?
A mixture. They
Unless you're
have
clowning, I
people who
suppose.
do the skills. The clowning thing is wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
But they have a mixture of approaches. You probably need to ask Charlie about that rather
I
than
would
me.
love to. I'd love to see. I'd love to, and again, wouldn't it be great to run off to the circus and
Yeah, he
do all
genuinely.
that? It's such a romantic story, but a
But how
wonderful one.
sad
And
that
again,
as a drama teacher, I wasn't approving of it. I mean, it's dreadful that I kind of snubbed my nose at it.
yeah, but you're
And
also a dad. You're also a dad.
I would have rather he'd gone to E15, which was the plan, and he was going to do physical theatre. I reckon him doing what he decided he was to do ended up being by far the better decision.
Because you can earn a living.
You get he's of all the kids in his year group from his school, him and about two others are doing in their career path what they were trained to do. The others have used their degree to get a job, but not necessarily doing what they were trained to do.
Do you think there's a role in schools to have, well, better vocational
I think schools just
experience?
need to be completely different.
Go on, tell me.
Um,
Change the whole school. Tell us.
well, the first thing I do is lose all the ridiculous formalities that there are. I wouldn't have the sir and miss thing. That's absolutely the first thing.
All right, can I tell you a story about this going back to my school days?
Yeah,
We had this was in 1975, something like that, 74, 73, something, I don't know, 75, I think. And we had the trendy new teacher arrived, and he's Alan Harris. And he says, "Right, you can call me Alan or you can call me Sir. Let's make this democratic and let's have a vote." And the class voted, and they voted to call him Sir. He said, "Right, fine, okay." So then, but he's the one, funny enough, who wrote plays and got us involved in doing school plays. We went down, we did a production at the Young Vic, which was unheard of. Even got in, we were in the Observer, for God's sake, and
well,
they had a picture of me in the Observer at the age of 16, singing songs written by our head of music and Alan Harris, our head of English. unfortunately, our head of English, not head of English, our English teacher, Alan Harris, who wrote these plays, unfortunately, he did go downhill and was his an anarchic side came out a bit too much, shall we say. And he drowned himself literally in alcohol by the end of it and didn't live.
Seem that the Christian name thing goes hand in hand with that. I certainly didn't. I don't drink.
Yeah.
And I was Mark from the beginning of Stantonbury right the way through until the end of my career, and that made all the difference because it was authentic. It was. I just find it really weird that teachers would want to be called sir or miss because, as I say, I haven't been knighted, and if I was, maybe I don't think I'd want to use it anyway.
And
So
of course it's not dame either.
no,
It's miss or
but
ms
I
now.
remember I spent
Madam.
3 years in a school where everybody, including the head teacher, was called by their first name. So it wasn't a trendy thing. It was just something that happened.
Yeah. It's I don't know whether it's the top of my list of things to change. I mean, it's like uniform as well. I mean, one of the
Yeah.
reasons I didn't last at school was because they introduced a uniform with the new strict head teacher. And on one day I got sent home because I didn't have a tie. And the next day I just went to school with the top half of my body. All I wore was a tie.
Very
So,
good.
you know,
Bizarrely, I wasn't at all interested in whether or not we had a uniform as a kid, and I only became interested in it when at Stantonbury they didn't, and then I moved to another school where they had uniform a bit, and they just spent all the time talking about it. We'd never talked about it at Stantonbury ever because they
do you
didn't
think
have one.
is this a class thing though? Is
It's
it
an English thing.
is
In
it
America, they don't have it.
well, yeah, they do in some schools.
Right.
Um, but
In France, they didn't have it that I ever came across
yeah,
when I
but they
was.
always seem to. I think it's when they come from French schools over here and they've all got the same rucksack on or something like that. I don't know. They're all on the tubes. They all look pretty similar. I think there must be a dress code or
Right.
something.
Well,
Certainly when they
Charlie
come
was
over.
saying when one of his friends, one of his circus friends, came over from abroad somewhere, they were saying how cute it looks that they're all in school uniform, and it was a really kind of
Yeah,
cute
yeah,
skit.
yeah.
But
But is it particularly? I mean, people have got this strange thing that it stops people seeing which class you're from, as though that's the big hang up over here. And yet, if you go to
right,
that school, it tends to be the posh school, and that one tends to be the poor school, and all
yeah.
that. But within school difference, I think that they're worried about. They're not worried about the boaters of Eton. They definitely tell you're at a different class than going around
It's
Harrow
very
Tech or
much
whatever it is.
easier to tell whether a kid's well off by seeing the standard of their dress with a uniform because it can get frayed, whereas jeans and t-shirt they wouldn't.
I think with well, I don't know that necessarily, but again, it's trying to hide poverty rather than tackle poverty. I think is the main issue. Why not? Yeah, let's put all our energy into making sure there aren't that many poor people.
Well, yeah, that's great too, but
But that's the old Marxist in me coming out
right.
there.
It's just for me, it's not. But in terms of curriculum, I don't have that expertise. But I just think I went through all my teaching career, and I guess we're going to have to draw this to a
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
conclusion. But just to kind of end off by saying I went through my whole teaching career kind of trying to justify drama. And in the end, when I've been doing this retrospective and with what's happened to my own kids, and obviously you don't have 18-year-old children when you're a baby teacher,
Mm.
but with my own kids and hearing what other kids that I've taught remember about education, they the things that are valuable are the things that we do in the arts generally, rather than maths or English or those subjects. Um,
I think there are students there who find it within maths, who find
oh, of
it
course,
within
yes, sorry,
physics.
yeah.
I don't think that there's a superior thing for the
Of
arts, but I
course,
don't think there's an inferior place for the
no,
arts, and
no.
that I certainly would die on that hill, so
You've,
to speak.
you've expressed that better than I have. Um, yes, and obviously I've not talked to the kids who didn't like drama, and there would be some of those, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Um, yeah, definitely. Um, but it's about yes, they're not having a system that is heading towards non-practical things being deemed the things that we're targeting
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
stronger way than the practical things.
I think there needs to be more room for subjective assessment. Funnily enough, I was saying that the dangers in that, but if people accept it as certainly as more subjective, as uh, which you can't do in an exam. You say that's an A, that's a one, that's a nine, and all these things. And the kid thinks that's what they are, and
Yeah,
that's a problem if it's in a really subjective place. In maths, not so much. You know, in
yeah.
maths, it's not so much of a issue, but in drama, it has to be something that has to be dealt with rather than just making everything written. Mark, your books are very much part of, as we came in on this, very much part of the uh, syllabi of
And
various
that's
exam
really
books.
weird, and it was never an intention.
No, of
So,
course, and but it's good that it is for you, I'm sure.
right, yes,
Good
lovely.
sales. If you were teaching one of your plays
Yeah.
on a course, how would you approach it? I mean, looking in the way the criteria, because it sounds to me it would have to be a bit different than the way you taught yourself when you were teaching.
Um, the way I was taught when I
Yeah, you wouldn't be. You would have to be talking about characterization. How would you perform this scene? How would you put this set together? How would you put the lighting in this scene? How would you play this character at this moment, and or the three moments in the play, different moments showing. You would have to know a bit about Stanislavski. You would have to sort of do this in the style of. Is this a realist play? What does that mean? Is it naturalistic? What does that mean? You would have to get involved in this terminology to give kids the language to describe what's going on when they want to direct your play or act in your play on paper. They've got to write these things down.
yeah, I wouldn't be very good at it probably, but that wouldn't worry me because I can put them on, and that's what they were intended to do. They it's lovely that they're exam pieces, but some of the questions that are asked about them. So in one exam, a question was asked about the characterization of an incredibly subsidiary character, and it's we'd never even given it any thought. It just isn't. And in any case, in many of the plays, they're not characters. That's a misnomer. They're real people. So it's about um, breathing a life into the people that is as close as you feel can be possibly what your truth would be.
And well, that comes to the bit I was talking right at the beginning about where I like to explore the difference between real and imaginary, actually, because they're
Right.
real people, but they are characters, are they not? I don't
No,
know.
they're not
But
characters.
what is a
Real.
character? What isn't a character? And these are hugely interesting things for drama students, I think, to explore. What
Yeah.
is the character? Where does it come from? But it's really interesting. The subsidiary character, you hadn't given it any thought. Does does but the pupil has to. There's
Yeah.
the problem. They have to know the play better than you, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah. That's not hard.
Mark, it's been wonderful to talk to you this afternoon.
It's been lovely to talk to you. A nice
And
break.
and we should do it again at some point and perhaps talk about one of your plays or something. And then we could ask people in the drama group perhaps to come up with questions. And also, if you're interested in either doing one of these interviews yourself, either with me, with Mark, or with anyone, or just doing a solo piece to camera and putting it on the site, we'd be interested in seeing those things. So please don't be shy. Do get in touch, and we'll perhaps put. Or who would you like to interview in the group? Who else would you like to see interviewed in the group? Then just put it down below, either on the YouTube sites. I think Mark's going to put it on his site as well as
Love
my
to. Yeah.
site, but also in the Facebook group when it goes up there. So thank you very much. Look, Mark, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been brilliant.
I'll see you again.